All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at strong versus weak cultures.
Yeah.
And we've got two Chinese sources that we're going to be pulling from
Right.
to explore this idea. And
It's going to be interesting.
it is, some of this stuff is a little bit mind-bending. So if you're ready to have your worldview maybe shaken up a little bit,
Oh, for sure.
then strap in because we're going to get into some fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think it's one of those topics that you kind of have an idea of what it is,
Yeah.
but then when you really start digging in, you realize how deep it actually goes
Mm-hmm.
and how much it applies to like every area of life, not just
Right. And that's what I'm excited to kind of unpack here.
yeah.
Because I think we throw around these terms strong culture and weak culture, but
Yeah.
but what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And how does that play out, not just in like societies, but in our own personal lives?
In our own decisions.
Yeah. So, why don't we start with just like the basic definitions here?
Yeah.
One of the sources lays out this idea of strong cultures being aligned with what it calls natural laws.
Mm-hmm.
And they use this jungle framework.
Right.
And then weak cultures, on the other hand, are described as relying more on hope, morality, and kind of this idea that,
Someone's going to come and save the day.
someone's going to come save the day. The cavalry's going to show up.
Right. Exactly.
What do you make of that distinction?
Well, I think, it's important to remember that this jungle analogy, it's not literal.
Right.
We're not talking about,
Not swinging from vines.
swinging from vines or living in trees.
Right.
It's really, it's a metaphor for the competitive forces that exist in the world,
Mhm.
And I think a lot of Chinese thought emphasizes that,
Yeah.
understanding those dynamics.
That's a consistent theme we see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Being pragmatic about how we approach success
Okay.
and not being, too idealistic or naive about the way things actually work. So I think the jungle, it serves as a good image for that.
Okay. Yeah, because they definitely don't sugarcoat it.
No, they don't.
One of the sources even uses the example of a wolf eating a sheep
Mm-hmm.
to drive home this point.
Pretty stark image.
It is stark.
But, I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
To kind of shake us out of those comfortable,
Yeah.
idealistic notions and be like, hey, like this is the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be hard.
Reality bites.
Yes, reality bites. And accepting that instead of clinging to maybe some naive ideas about how the world should work. I think that's a key characteristic of a strong culture.
Okay. So it's acknowledging those maybe uncomfortable truths
Mm-hmm.
and then like working with that reality.
Right. Working within that framework.
Yeah. So I'm curious, for you listening right now, does this idea of a law of the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
does that resonate with how you see the world working?
Yeah. Think about that.
Yeah. Give that some thought.
Because I think, we can often get caught up in, wanting everything to be fair and wanting things to, work out a certain way.
Yeah, we want that happy ending.
But the reality is that's not always the case. And
Yeah.
so how do we operate within a system
Yeah.
that maybe doesn't always play by the rules that we wish it did?
Well, and that leads to maybe the most thought-provoking, maybe unsettling part of this.
Oh, yeah.
One of the sources flat out says that all relationships are essentially transactional.
Mm-hmm.
And even those acts we consider selfless, like raising children,
Mm-hmm.
are ultimately motivated by self-interest on some level.
That one's a bit hard to swallow.
I don't know about you, but that one made me raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, I can understand why.
Like, really?
It can feel a bit jarring,
Yeah.
Kind of goes against some of the things that we're taught to value.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that the source isn't saying that love and compassion and those things don't exist.
Right.
It's saying, but let's look at the underlying motivations for all human behavior. And I think that's where it gets interesting because if we're not aware of those,
Mm-hmm.
then we can actually be more prone to being manipulated or exploited
Right.
by those who do.
It's almost like keep your friends close
Yeah.
and your enemies closer, but it's about those driving forces,
Yes.
even the less flattering ones, so that you protect yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And speaking of influences, this idea of cultural programming
Yes.
really comes up strong in one of the sources.
Yeah, very, very important concept.
And they use the example of someone who grew up eating spicy Sichuan food.
Right, right.
And so now maybe, as an adult, they just don't enjoy anything that doesn't have
A little kick.
a kick to it.
Yeah.
But it's more than just taste buds, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What's the broader point they're making?
I think the point is that kind of programming, it impacts every area of our lives. It affects how we define success.
Okay.
How we view authority.
Interesting.
Our financial habits.
Really?
Our beliefs about relationships, everything,
No.
And the source is arguing that most of us are basically living out the beliefs of our families.
Interesting.
Of our communities, of the broader culture.
Huh. Without even realizing it.
Without even realizing it. And that's what's so thought-provoking about it, right?
And that's what's so, I guess, like, both potentially freeing,
right,
but also terrifying.
Absolutely. Because if we're not aware of it,
Right.
Then it's kind of like we're just
on autopilot.
On autopilot, just going through life based on this programming.
So then how do we break free? How do we even, know what to question?
Right. That's the $1 million question.
Right.
And thankfully, one of the sources actually gives us a framework for that.
Okay, lay it on me.
They suggest a 3-step process. Believe, follow, attach.
Okay, break that down.
So first, believe.
Okay.
And this is about believing in those who have already achieved what you desire.
Okay.
Even if their methods seem a little unorthodox, maybe even a little harsh.
So be open-minded.
Be open-minded. Even to the people who maybe initially you're like, I don't know about this person.
Yeah, rub you the wrong way a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But recognize that they have something.
They know something.
They know something. They have a knowledge or a strategy that we can learn from.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right. So believe in those individuals.
Yeah.
Then we have follow.
Okay.
And this isn't about blindly copying.
Right.
But it's about observing successful people who are within your reach. Study their actions.
Okay.
Try to understand their decision making.
Okay.
What are the principles behind what they're doing? And then finally we have attach.
Okay, and this one's a little intense.
Yeah, this one's a bit more
a little creepy.
Maybe a little creepy. Yeah. But think of it as, finding mentors, guides who embody this strong culture thinking.
So really immersing yourself.
Yeah. In their world, learning their mindset.
Like an apprenticeship for life.
Yes, exactly. But for success on your own terms, right?
I'm starting to see how this all ties back into that jungle analogy. It's like learning from the wolves.
Yes.
To understand the rules of the game.
Yes. Yes.
Not to become a wolf yourself.
Right.
Necessarily.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And one source even argues that sometimes the most effective paths to success might seem illogical or even wrong based on what we've been taught.
That's key. That's a really key point. Yeah. Because it's challenging us to question, what does right even mean? What if what we think is right is actually holding us back?
Right.
And what if those unconventional approaches are actually the ones that are going to lead to the greatest results?
Like playing to win the game as opposed to playing by the rules.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's a great example in the source.
Okay.
It talks about a Chinese TV show called Ta. Huh? And in that show, it's fascinating. The characters who trust these unconventional methods, who embrace these seemingly wrong ideas, those are the ones who ultimately succeed.
Wow.
While the characters who are clinging to logic and conventional wisdom, they're the ones who struggle and get left behind.
Huh. I'll have to check that show out.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay, I'm adding it to the list. Now, before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
okay,
I want to bring up another fascinating concept from our second source. They call it the heaven, earth, and man framework.
Okay, yes.
And they use this to analyze how strong cultures emerge.
Yeah, I like this framework.
I do too. It's like a recipe for success,
Right.
but on a societal level.
Exactly.
So break it down for us. What are the ingredients?
Okay, so we have heaven.
Okay.
And heaven represents the timing. Okay.
Or the historical circumstances.
So right place, right time kind of thing.
Right place, right time. You got to have that.
Okay.
That's crucial.
Right.
Then we have Earth.
Okay.
And Earth refers to the geographical advantages and resources
Makes sense.
that a culture has at its disposal.
Okay.
You know, what are the natural resources?
Right.
What's the lay of the land, that kind of thing.
Okay, so heaven is timing, Earth is resources, and man is the wild card.
Man is the wild card. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man encompasses all those cultural traits that contribute to a group's ability to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So things like hard work,
Okay.
adaptability, willingness to take risks, and a strong sense of community or shared purpose.
Okay, so it's like that perfect storm of circumstances and cultural traits coming together to propel a group forward?
Exactly.
Huh, it's giving me a whole new way to think about history.
It's a fascinating lens to look at it through, right?
It is. Because it's not just about, one great leader or one lucky break.
Right.
It's about this whole ecosystem of factors that are all working together.
Yeah. But before we get too far down that road,
okay,
I want to bring up a concept from the second source that at first glance seems to contradict everything we've been talking about.
Oh, interesting. What's that?
They make this distinction between enlightenment, woo, and cultivation.
That's it. Yes.
And it seems like this whole jungle mindset is about power and self-interest, but then they also emphasize compassion and balance.
Right. So how do those two coexist?
Yeah. How do those fit together?
Yeah, that is a paradox.
It's a good one, though. It's a juicy one.
It is a juicy one. And I think the source is getting at something really important here.
Okay.
Which is that while understanding those power dynamics is crucial, those who achieve true strength, they also have a responsibility to create space for others. To prevent this unchecked greed or inequality.
So it's not just about climbing to the top.
It's not just about climbing to the top. It's about what you do when you get there.
Right. It's how you use your power once you have it.
Exactly. Exactly. And the source even suggests that unchecked ruthlessness can lead to a society's downfall.
So it's like a cautionary tale almost.
It is. It is. Yeah. About, thinking long-term, thinking about the well-being of the whole.
Yeah. So it's like, a wise king uses their strength to protect their people and make sure the kingdom thrives.
Exactly.
As opposed to just like hoarding all the gold for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's about creating a system where everyone has the opportunity to flourish.
Okay. That's a great place to pause. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come back to explore this idea even further in part 2.
All right. Sounds good. So we were talking about this idea of enlightened leadership. Where strength and compassion can actually work together.
Yeah. It's almost like this idea that a true strong culture leader, they're not just focused on their own power.
Right.
They're thinking about how to use that power responsibly.
Absolutely.
To create a thriving society.
Yeah. And they're thinking about the long-term consequences of their actions, not just the immediate gains.
Okay. So how do we actually cultivate that kind of enlightened leadership?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Both in ourselves and in the groups that we're part of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that happens overnight, right? It's a process. And I think one of the most important starting points is self-awareness.
Okay.
Really understanding our own motivations, our biases, our tendencies.
So know thyself, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Know thyself.
Right.
Because if we don't understand ourselves, how can we possibly hope to lead others effectively?
And it's also about recognizing how our own cultural programming might be influencing our decisions.
Absolutely. Remember that spicy Sichuan food analogy?
Oh, yeah.
That's just one example of how our cultural background shapes us. And being mindful of those influences is so important.
Like recognizing those blind spots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And challenging those deeply ingrained beliefs that might be holding us back.
Okay, so we've got to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to challenge those old beliefs.
Right.
But what else is part of this enlightened leadership equation?
Well, I think another crucial aspect is a willingness to learn and grow.
Okay.
A true, strong culture
Mm-hmm.
is one that embraces change
Okay.
and constantly seeks out new knowledge and perspectives.
So it's not about being rigid or dogmatic.
No.
It's about having that flexibility
Yes.
to evolve, to respond to new challenges, new opportunities.
Because the world is constantly changing.
It is.
And if you're not willing to adapt, we're going to get left behind.
It's like adapt or die, but not just about survival.
Right.
It's about thriving.
It's about thriving.
Exactly.
In the face of all these changes that are happening.
Yeah. I mean, think about how much the world has transformed.
Mm-hmm.
Even just in the past few decades.
Right. Technology,
globalization,
climate change, social inequality. It's a lot.
It's a lot to deal with.
So how do we bring that compassion into the equation?
Ooh, that's the key. Right.
Because the world can feel like a very competitive, a very ruthless place sometimes.
It can.
So how do we cultivate that empathy?
Well, I think it starts with a shift in perspective.
Okay.
The source isn't saying that we have to be pushovers or naive idealists.
Okay.
But it is saying that a truly strong culture is built on a foundation of mutual respect, of cooperation, of a genuine concern for the well-being of everyone.
So it's recognizing that we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A rising tide lifts all boats. If we're constantly trying to tear each other down, ultimately we're all going to suffer. So it's a more sustainable approach.
Yeah.
But also just a more, heart-centered approach.
I hope so, yeah.
Okay, so if someone's listening to this and they're like, all right, I want to start cultivating this kind of leadership, where do they begin?
Well, I think one of the most powerful things anyone can do is to find mentors, role models who embody these principles.
Yeah. So it's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire you. Who
inspire you to be better.
Yeah.
And remember, these mentors don't have to be, CEOs or world leaders.
Right.
They can be anyone who embodies the qualities that you admire. And who you can learn from.
I like that.
It could be a teacher, a community leader, a parent, even a friend.
Yeah. So it's about being intentional about those influences.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about individual leadership. But I'm also curious about how these concepts apply to larger groups of people. Can we talk about strong and weak cultures in the context of companies?
Well, absolutely.
Community.
Yeah.
Even entire nations.
Definitely.
So what makes a company, for example, have a strong culture?
Well, I think one of the key factors is adaptability.
Okay.
How well does a company respond to change? Are they embracing new ideas, new technologies?
So in today's world, that means being agile.
Agile, innovative.
Yeah.
Always looking for ways to improve.
Okay, so that's one piece. I'm also thinking about shared values.
Yes.
A company where people feel connected.
Yeah, right.
And they're willing to work together for that common good.
Absolutely. That sense of community is so important. It's about having that shared purpose.
Right. Something that binds people together.
Exactly. It's like a unifying narrative.
Okay. So adaptability, shared values, a strong sense of community. What else contributes to a strong culture?
This one might surprise you, but the ability to learn from mistakes.
Oh, interesting.
A strong culture doesn't shy away from failure. It embraces it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
So it's not about being afraid to make mistakes.
No. It's about having the humility to acknowledge them and the willingness to course correct.
So it's fail fast, fail often.
Yeah, but it's not just about failing.
Right.
It's about learning from those failures.
Coming back stronger.
Exactly. And that ties back to enlightened leadership, right? Leaders who embody those qualities.
So they're setting the tone for the entire culture.
Yes. Creating an environment where everyone feels safe to experiment.
Okay, so it's not just about individual success.
Yeah.
It's about creating a collective mindset
It is.
that empowers groups to achieve incredible things.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier.
Okay.
This idea that sometimes the most useful ideas might seem illogical.
Mm-hmm. Or even wrong.
Yeah, based on our current beliefs.
Right.
And it's like, how do we know which wrong ideas to reconsider?
Ooh, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. How do we figure that out?
I think it comes down to critical thinking,
Yeah.
questioning our assumptions,
Hmm?
examining the evidence,
Yeah.
being willing to challenge those deeply held beliefs.
So being open to new perspectives.
Absolutely, even those that make us uncomfortable.
Yeah, like stepping outside of our echo chambers.
Exactly.
But that can be hard.
It can be, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Okay, so we got to be willing to embrace that discomfort.
We do.
Because that's where the growth happens.
That's where the magic happens.
It's like trusting the process.
Trusting the process, yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a lot to take in.
It has.
But I'm feeling really inspired
Okay.
to keep exploring these ideas and
Yeah.
to, maybe challenge some of my own assumptions.
I think that's the takeaway, right?
Yeah.
To not be afraid to question things.
To be curious.
To be curious.
To be open to new possibilities.
Exactly.
Now, before we go, I want to touch on one last concept from that first source.
Okay.
The idea that we often focus on the thief eating the meat, but not the thief being beaten.
Such a powerful analogy.
It is. What do you think they're getting at with that?
I think it's a reminder that we often only see the surface level of success.
Mm.
The wealth, the power, the achievement.
Right, the shiny facade.
Exactly. But we don't see the sacrifices, the risks, the potential unethical behavior.
That might have gone into it.
That might have led to that success.
It's like we're drawn to those shiny objects.
We are.
Without really considering the potential downsides.
Yeah, the hidden costs.
So it's a cautionary tale.
It is.
But not being seduced by appearances.
Right, and about being critical thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Looking beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Considering the full context.
Okay, so what seems like the easy path
Right.
might actually be a shortcut to a dead end.
It might be, yeah.
So it's about choosing the path
Mm-hmm.
that leads to that sustainable success.
Sustainable, ethical, and ultimately more fulfilling.
Okay, I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back with part 3
All right.
to explore some final thoughts on how these concepts can really help us navigate the complexities of life
Sounds good.
and create a more just and equitable world.
Looking forward to it.
That thief eating meat thing, it really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It makes you think about, like, what are we not seeing?
Right, exactly. Like what's the whole story here?
Yeah. So how do we even know which paths to success are worth pursuing?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Like, how do we know if we're taking that strong culture approach
Mm-hmm.
that's going to lead to, like, genuine success?
Yeah, the kind that lasts.
Yeah, the kind that lasts, not just the flash in the pan,
Right, exactly. And I think, going back to what we've been talking about, a strong culture, it's adaptable.
Okay.
It embraces change, it values learning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also about like that sense of shared purpose.
Okay, so it's not just about me. It's about, like, us.
Yeah, it's about understanding that we're all interconnected.
Okay.
And that real success,
Mm-hmm.
it involves creating a system that benefits everyone.
It's like all for one and one for all, kinda.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our own success is tied to the success of others.
Okay, and that brings us back to that enlightened leadership idea, right?
Exactly. It's like a leader who gets it.
Mm-hmm.
They understand that they're not just trying to climb to the top,
Mm-hmm.
but they're trying to create a way for others to rise too.
I like that.
Yeah, it's about lifting each other up.
And that takes a certain set of values, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, what are the guiding principles that are going to shape that kind of culture?
I think it's things like integrity,
Okay.
compassion, innovation, maybe a commitment to social justice.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, winning at all costs.
No, it's about how you win.
Right.
It's about doing it in a way that feels good.
That aligns with like your moral compass or with your values. Exactly.
Okay, but that can be hard, right?
It can be.
Because sometimes doing the right thing, it's not the easy thing.
It's not the most profitable or the most efficient
It might mean making some sacrifices.
It might.
In short term.
To achieve something greater in the long run.
And that takes courage.
It does.
It takes conviction. And maybe even like a willingness to be a little bit unpopular.
Yeah, to stand out from the crowd.
And that brings us to that final question from the source. That if truly useful ideas often sound illogical at first, what seemingly wrong belief might you need to reconsider?
Ooh, it's a good one.
It's a tough one. It's like, what do I need to unlearn?
Right. What am I holding on to?
Yeah, that's actually holding me back.
What if the things I think are right are actually the things that are keeping me stuck?
Yeah, and there's no easy answer to that, right?
Yeah.
It's something that we each have to wrestle with and figure out for ourselves.
But the point is to be willing to ask the question.
Yes. To be curious.
Yeah.
To be open to new possibilities.
Because what if those wrong ideas are the ones that lead to the breakthroughs?
Right. What if they're the key to unlocking something amazing?
I love that. It's like giving yourself permission to be wrong.
Yes.
And to see where that takes you.
Exactly.
Well, this whole conversation has been a real mind bender.
It has.
But in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
It's like it's given me a new way of looking at the world.
I hope so.
And I think the takeaway for me is if we're willing to challenge ourselves, to embrace change, to never stop learning, then there's no limit to what we can achieve.
Absolutely. And not just individually, but together as a society, as a global community.
So to everyone listening out there, I encourage you, keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, don't let the conversation end here.
Ask yourself those tough questions. Find those mentors who challenge you.
Yes.
And embrace that discomfort, because that's where the growth is.
That's where the magic is.
And who knows? Maybe those wrong ideas are the ones that will change the world.
It's possible.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.